Check it out now. One of the things, we're going to talk about generative AI in a few different ways, but one of the things that I'm most excited about with that is, again, we've been talking about personalization for years, and it's getting better, and depending on what you use, how you use it, how you approach it, it can be done pretty well already. But I'm really excited about generative AI to take personalization truly one-to-one, keeping in mind the things that you're saying.
Yes.
But where are we quite there yet? Are we there close to get that true content generation one-to-one? Where do you think we are?
I think we're in a place where, I'm seeing Gen AI make personalization better, and that it's inspiring more creativity. Yeah. I think as it relates to, AI generated content and personalization, I think we still need that human element involved, just because, for example, as it relates to CDH, when you're a client of ours, you build out a library of conversations for your next best action. Yeah. So that library is only going to be as good as the number of offers that you put in it and the volume, right? So if a brand is able to understand their customer and create really valuable content and a ton of offers, that's going to be, they're going to have better outcomes. Yeah. As it relates to Gen AI, I think what that is going to do is it's going to reduce the time to market that you get creatives created. It's going to help with, we have a great customer that's a large healthcare provider in Australia, and they actually use the Gen AI within CDH to do pre-concepting, so that when they hand over their brief to their agency, they're further along down the path, and they only have to go 4 rounds instead of 10. Yeah. And that saves money, it saves cycles and burnout, it saves energy and carbon footprint. So I think, if you can make the creative process better, personalization will get better along with it.
Yeah, and that's another interesting part to me is not just, I think there's a lot of talk about generative AI in terms of creating, text, images, video now, all this stuff. But the process improvements, certainly that's something Pega is very familiar with, for many years. But mixing generative AI with process improvements, I think, is really interesting and not necessarily something that marketers would have gravitated to first, But what are your thoughts there as far as, you mentioned kind of an example there, but where do we take that? How can we take it further?
Yeah, I think at first people were afraid that Gen AI was going to take their jobs. And now we're understanding that that's not really the case. I think, it makes our individual processes better. I think, as marketers, we're always under-resourced. We're asked to do so much. And for an industry that's supposed to be very creative, there's a lot of processes that just really burn you out. So as an individual contributor, even just being able to brainstorm my outline for something is a huge energy brain save. It's a way to sort of even come to a brainstorming meeting more prepared. There's nothing worse than showing up for a 3-hour brainstorming meeting and nobody has ideas because everybody's just totally burned out and blank.
Right. They're worried about the minutia of the stuff that must get done, but doesn't really doesn't require human brain power. It just is taking it regardless, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. The other thing, I've used a lot of different AI tools myself, and I write a lot of stuff and everything. What I've noticed is I'm a really iterative person, and so sometimes you could say I wing it sometimes.
Sure.
Actually using prompts and doing these things has actually kind of brought me back to actually being a little more strategic and thinking a few steps ahead, because you're essentially explaining what you want to do to a child, for lack of nothing against children, someone or something that knows nothing about anything unless without context, right?
Yeah,
so it's
for sure.
It's actually kind of forced me to Yeah, to think 4 steps ahead and then benefit from the, from kind of the grunt work, so to say, that it's able to do. But I don't know, what impacts do you see it having on marketing teams?
Yeah, I think we're going to see just the ability to scale. Content variation is a major, tactical process that's going to be an area it's going to help a lot. And I think as it relates to, again, personalization and things like, if you're a global marketing organization, you have to make this in English, French, Japanese, however many languages. And you also have to be culturally sensitive in those situations. And so creating an ad set takes a lot longer. But if you can do it based on stuff you've already done with Gen AI, you're going to be able to scale that process way faster and better.
Yeah. And so another thing to kind of add on to, so building on process and AI. So good marketers pay attention to analytics. They're statistics driven. A marketer that says they don't like math is a little suspect to me.
Sure.
But I don't consider myself I'm not a PhD mathematician, but you kind of have to know this stuff. But I think there's a difference between being really good at reading the numbers and being data driven.
Sure.
So being able to interpret is one thing, but then that feedback loop, I think, is what's often missing from a lot of teams, is really taking the data, understanding it, and then having it actually drive the decisions. And certainly, at Pega World, we've been hearing a lot about data-driven decision-making in the enterprise. Just curious your thoughts on, do you think marketers are moving more towards being data-driven in decision-making? Is there still some, room to move there?
Yeah, I think one of the innovations that AI has brought to us is the ability to understand if our programs are working more quickly and be able to pull insights from channels more effectively. So if you think about the old days, you might run a campaign, whoever ran it for you, or maybe you ran it internally, you get the results after. Then you can go back and say, okay, this message didn't work over here, this message worked better over here. I think what we're seeing now is the ability to, A1, be able to simulate things and test them before you put them into production, which is huge. And then also, in the middle of a campaign, if something's not resonating, you can pull it down. If there's an error, you can pull it down. There's no reason to stop something that's not working. There's no reason to let something continue just because you've put it in motion. And I think the smart marketers understand that.
Yeah. And I know it's not a new feature in the Pega platform, but the simulation thing that you mentioned is very cool.
It is,
the first time I saw it was a little while ago, but the first time I saw it, just kind of blows your mind to think that, again, we get the smartest people we can in a room and we strategize and we look at the analytics and all that kind of stuff, but this is very different than that. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, so just at the most basic granular level, if you think about a brand having to calculate how much a customer relationship is worth to them, that's kind of like a hand tabulation, right? Your XYZ, multiply that by whatever. With Customer Decision Hub, you can actually figure out what value that interaction is going to give you for that specific customer with the algorithm. So then you're in a position where you can say, okay, I figured out that these 50 customers should not be given this offer because it's not going to be profitable based on the product that that they're eligible for, or, in some respects that we want to sell to them. So being able to see the value so instantly on that granular level, I think, is a marketing planner's dream scenario.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, it's pretty interesting, and it does so much of the legwork for you and guesswork. Takes some of that stuff out of the way. Another thing that was announced here at Pega World is Gen AI Blueprint, and I know it's not necessarily specific to marketing, but very cool feature and probably has some implications later on for other things like what we've been talking about. Do you mind just talking a little bit about it? Yeah.
So as it relates to CDH, we are actually working on a CDH blueprint,
Nice,
and
okay.
and the functionality there is going to be to map out your customer journeys. So I think that's journey orchestration is still something that we see marketers struggling with, and we believe that the customer is really in control of the journey. Like, we shouldn't be pushing them in a direction or another, but this is going to be a way to see how you're mapping it out before it goes live, and if that's a rational path for you. And not every brand is going to be in the position to have adaptive analytics. So for the folks that are still programming out their customer journeys, that's going to be a blueprint to have that in front of you is great.
Yeah. Well, and I think some of the struggles that, at least that I've seen organizations run into, is with journey orchestration. Not only the customer, when, as you're saying, when you try to map out and guess what the customer needs, and you're essentially telling the customer what they need instead of listening to the customer. So it's counterintuitive to the whole idea of customer experience when you think of it that way. But I think another hurdle that a lot of orgs run into is the journey of the customer is one thing, but all of the supporting roles and processes that lie under, behind the scenes, so to speak. There's a lot that needs to change and stuff. So, I mean, is that kind of part of the process too?
Yeah, I mean, so not every organization has all of their channels connected, right? So it's a way too to identify gaps. Like, okay, this is going to run, but this other channel is disconnected, so we need to account for that in some other way.
Yeah, definitely. Well, as we kind of wrap up here, as we're kind of talking about, I guess we talked about a few things here today. So, where is Pega kind of positioning itself as this? You could say it's a convergence of, there's Gen AI, there's different types of AI, first party data. What should we be looking for, in the months ahead?
Yeah, I think we're getting to the place where we're going to be an end-to-end solution with some of the partnerships and things that we're creating, and more to come on that. But I think the thing that I have seen in my career is that there's just really no one-size-fits-all solution. And I think that the way that Pega can work with brands and work with data connectors and partners, we're going to be as close to that as you can possibly get.
Yeah, love it. Well, very last question. What's the highlight for you this year at Pega World?
Oh my gosh, the highlight is seeing people that I don't get to see throughout the year that I work with. Partners, to journalists, to colleagues, and just realizing how lucky that I am to be surrounded by brilliant, creative, just lovely folks.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great to hear.
Yeah. I love my job, and it just reminds me that.